All right, receivers. Go receivers. And remember, this is tiers, right? Like I have rankings for Dub Club members, and that's the rankings to my best ability, but I don't firmly believe in rankings. I'm more of a tier type guy. I think that there's elite plays, secondary options, etc. So even if I give you guys the rankings or I put them in a specific order, know that tiers are more valuable to me than rankings. Rankings are available if you're looking for them on the Dub Club. In the first tier receivers to me is a clear cut for CeeDee Lamb is in this tier going up against the Giants tonight, so get him in your lineups. Justin Jefferson up against Jair Alexander in Green Bay. He's had some really good games against them, some duds against them. I think we're somewhere in between that, probably on the more of a good game tier thing for me with Justin Jefferson. They're getting him involved. Amon-Ra St. Brown against Seattle, some tough corners out there, but he operates out the slot, so it's a good thing for Amon-Ra St. Brown. And then Jamar Chase against Carolina this week. May see a little bit of J.C. Horn at times, but for the most part, they move him around the lineup pretty well. So I'm expecting him to have a solid output this week. In the second tier is it's a very harsh tier break. And a surprising name at the top of this tier for me is Chris Godwin. So expecting a good game from Chris Godwin, who's been playing out of the slot, playing really well. Obviously, this Philly secondary has been beat a lot, so Godwin is in this tier. Nico Collins against Jacksonville, Rashee Rice against the Chargers, Marvin Harrison in a plus matchup. I typically wouldn't have him top 10. This is a matchup-based play for Marvin Harrison against the Commanders. Devontae Smith, if he plays, would be in this tier. If he plays and A.J. Brown does not, would be in this tier. He is very questionable to play. A bunch of receivers with tough matchups. Garrett Wilson versus Denver, Devontae Adams at Cleveland, Chris Olave versus the Falcons, Brandon Ayuk versus New England, Christian Gonzalez, Tyreek Hill against L'Jarius Sneed in Tennessee. And to kind of round out this tier, we got Malik Neighbors up against Dallas, who's been tough against receivers, Mike Evans, Stephon Diggs, Drake London, and DK Metcalf. The name I probably have lower than everybody else in the world is Malik Neighbors, but he's in this second tier. I just feel like this tier is full of like guys that could be wide receiver ones this week. I can see that happening, but I think Malik Neighbors is good. That Dallas secondary is going to force somebody else to beat him, though. Diggs and him obviously have a matchup in store, so I'm very intrigued by what that looks like tonight. If Malik Neighbors goes crazy on Thursday Night Football, or if we see this rush attack for the Giants going a little bit more, which is kind of what I'm expecting. I'm expecting to see this running game a little bit more from the Giants tonight, but Malik could outplay this. A lot of the guys I think could outplay this secondary tier that I have. It's just they're all kind of grouped together to me. I don't think one is just like significantly stronger than the other. Like if you told me DK or Godwin, I'm going to have like, I don't know. If you told me Mike Evans or Nico Collins, I'm going to be like, Brandon Ayuk or Garrett Wilson. This is a kind of a tier where I think a lot of these players are interchangeable. So this second tier, it goes from like back end wide receiver 1 to mid tier to back end wide receiver 1 to like back end wide receiver 2. It's pretty similar to how we were drafting. A lot of similar type plays with question marks due to matchup, question marks due to consistency. There's a lot here. So yeah, the second tier is big for me, I would say. Third tier. We got T. Higgins against Carolina, Zay Flowers against Buffalo, Calvin Ridley against the Miami Dolphins, George Pickens against the Colts, JSN against the Detroit Lions, Terry McLaurin off a bounce-back effort against Arizona, could be a stronger play this week, DJ Moore against the Rams, Amari Cooper in revenge. I'm just going to highlight the revenge games. They're not always revenge games. Against the Raiders. He was questionable play, but it looks like he's going to give it a go this week. Khalil Shakir is now in this tier against the Baltimore Ravens this week. Deontay Johnson against the Cincinnati Bengals. Jaden Reed against the Minnesota Vikings. Juwan Jennings against the New England Patriots. And then Jameson Williams against Seattle. So a couple guys I want to know. Obviously, Terry McLaurin is back in this tier, the circle of trust type tier, where we're not overly concerned about their production, but he belongs in this tier. Now, I think he proved last week that maybe they've righted the ship. This is a good chance for us to find out as fantasy fans if that's in fact true. Jackson Smith and Jigba going up against Detroit on Monday night is a start for me in a top 24 play. He's on the wide receiver 2 radar for me this week. I would start him over some of the more notable names like a DJ Moore, Amari Cooper. I would start him over some of those names. Even though I think those are good, just as good of plays. Personally, I think JSN has a solid week this week, receptions-wise. And then Juwan Jennings is in this tier. Obviously, I talked about Christian Gonzalez. Brandon Ayuk probably will see a lot of Christian Gonzalez this week. And Juwan Jennings, who had a phenomenal week, he's a tough bench this week. A tough bench. So I have him in this wide receiver 3 tier. As far as the wide receiver 4s, these are your more questionable plays. Michael Pittman is in this tier against the Steelers. Jalen Waddle against the Tennessee Titans. Rashid Shaheed against Atlanta. I was kind of hard on Rashid Shaheed after I had bigged him up. I was like, man, I don't know about Shaheed. He's just an up and down play, and I have to kind of just give him the goose egg he had last week. Like, he had some opportunities in the game. I think I was a little hard on him in my when I was talking yesterday in my start him, sit him. Still a starter for this team. If the offense is better, I expect Shaheed to be better. To me, he's still a good flex play, wide receiver 3 for me this week. Romo Dunze against the Rams, too, will have some opportunities. Tank Dell, I had him in this tier. But if he's out for this game, obviously we're not going to put him in the tier. Brian Thomas is in this tier going up against Houston. Could have a tougher matchup against Derek Stingley this week. Jerry Jeudy, Demarcus Robinson, and Brandon Cooks are in this tier. Jacoby Myers is also in this tier, who's been kind of a consistent play this year. I have him in this tier. Those are like my flex options. And then your desperation plays are coming after that. I don't want to spend too much time on them. I'll go through probably this 5th tier here, and then I'm going to stop because most of these guys are like either big play or touchdown or bust. None of them, or maybe they're a receptions guy. None of them truly has a ton of explosion, but there's a couple names in this next tier that I do want to talk about. Christian Kirk against Houston. Obviously, this is a player that got to get back involved in the passing game. So I don't know if I expect an explosion game out of him, but a get-right game could be in store for Christian Kirk. Xavier Worthy against the Chargers, who's been mad inconsistent. Jahan Dotson is the name that I really want to talk about with all the receivers out for Philly. If Devontae Smith does miss time, I would move him into that 4th tier and expect him to be the leading receiver for the Eagles. I don't see a huge ceiling either way, but I do see increased opportunity for Dotson if Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown do miss this game. Also put Alec Pierce, Keon Coleman, Quentin Johnston, Josh Reynolds in this tier, Cortland Sutton. This is, like I said, you start getting those fringe options here, and I think we're looking at like schedule, who's their DB they're going up against, just little things like that offer the upside. So they're all kind of like 7 to 10 point plays almost week, offer little to no ceiling and offer a lot of floor, a low floor if we're talking that. So full wide receiver rankings are on the Dub Club if you're looking for those. They're, like I said, for me, it's more tier-based, especially at the receiver position. And then real quick into tight ends, Trey McBride, Kelsey, and Laporta still lead this number 1 tier. Obviously, Laporta and McBride are both questionable for this week. I think I'm buying a Kelsey bounce-back game for this week. In the 2nd tier is really the only startable tight ends, I would say, this week for me. And I would say when it comes to like Brock Bowers, he belongs in this tier. George Kittle is doubtful to play, but if he does play, I would still put him in this tier. He did get in the limited practice yesterday, which was good to see. So hopefully George Kittle is on track to play. If he plays, I would play him. Dalton Kincaid off a strong week going up against Baltimore is in this tier. Kyle Pitts, Mark Andrews, I still have him in this tier. It's either this tier or probably damn near out the fucking rankings if he can't produce this week. Dallas Goedert is in this tier. I'm going to also move him up in my rankings because of the wide receiver situation if Devontae Smith and A.J. Brown don't play. Jake Ferguson, a touchdown or bust option in this tier. And then Evan Ingram, if he does play, would be a play for me here. He is very questionable for the week. Outside of that are going to be your more questionable names: Pat Freiermuth, Isaiah Likely, Zach Ertz, Dalton Schultz, Gesicki, Noah Fant, Cole Kmet. So just a lot of questionable decisions at tight end, and it doesn't offer more than like a 10-point ceiling for most players. So that does it for receivers and tight ends. Let me know y'all thoughts on the rankings. Let me know your thoughts on the rankings.